This week on the Notorious Scoundrels podcast.
Focus on that one while this other one comes around the corner and just murders the rest of your family.
I mean,
yeah, they do that.
Wow. Are so good.
Just like an Imperial, just jump straight to the war crimes.
I mean, it's in their name.
Well, hey, I mean, it was troopers. Luke and Leia. Yeah,
the death troopers.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, we're not going to bother with the soldiers.
They're not. Yeah. They're not life troopers. They're not. They're not peace troopers.
They're not Geneva Convention troopers.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a podcast focused on tactics and competitive play for Star Wars Legion. Hosted by Kyle Dornbos, Michael Barry, and David Zelenka, with Jay Shalansky, the man behind the glass.
Welcome back to another episode of the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Mike Barry, along with my co-hosts, who have already been introduced on our really sweet intro. So how you guys doing today?
I'm all right. I've been battling a lung infection, so
Ugh.
Good as I can be.
Nice.
But I'm here.
Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't hurt you too bad to talk a ton today.
No, it won't. Nah, throat's okay. I have an inhaler now, though.
We've actually got our man behind the glass here as well, because he's got some things to talk about. How you doing, Jay?
Hello. I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for unmuting my mic for this episode. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. As your overlord, just know that this is only temporary.
Right, and if I get out of line, I get the stick.
Yes.
I got it.
That's how this relationship works.
Yeah.
Benevolent overlord. Benevolent.
Because I'm the overlord of the situation. So I think we've got some housekeeping stuff to take care of. We've got a really cool event, the Northeast Open, coming up. Jay, you're the master and commander of that event. You can talk about it way better than I can. Do you want to kind of pipe that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so Northeast Open, this is our Syracuse event that we've been talking about, and it's finally on its way. And you know what? It's going to be awesome. We've got a number of people that are signed up already, and I think you should register soon because it's going to be amazing. And I know that we've only really announced some of the last place stuff. Second to last place get mats. Whoever brings the jankiest list is going to get the Golden T-47 award. But so everybody knows, each one of you, whoever comes to this, is going to get, we're going to have a little bit of a swag bag, and we're going to be giving out something to everyone. So, I teased it on our episode last week, but I'll tease it on your episode. We are giving out order tokens that are specific to this event, and an order token bag, as well as some other swag that'll just be just for showing up. So, that's your money's worth right there, actually. If you look at the price of, how much tokens are, and, how much the Discord tokens costs and all that stuff. So that'll be your cost of admission right there.
There'll be the nice ceramic ones too, I think, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And it's going to be, so that's July 6th and 7th in Syracuse, New York. You can register at thefifthtrooper.com. Go to the top, go to Northeast Open. Highly recommend you guys register soon, because it's people are starting to fill up those spots. So if you want in, if you're planning on coming up, you got to register.
Now, just to be absolutely clear, Jay, these tokens are not available anywhere else.
No. No, unlike other events, we won't be selling these or anything afterwards. So you can only get them at the event, or if we have a surplus, like if we have some people drop or something and we have some extra, we may just give them away for free, as like a giveaway or something, but you won't be able to purchase them. So it's only at the Northeast Open or a special giveaway that you'll be able to give them.
All right, so sign up and come get yours in Syracuse on July 6th and 7th.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. For those of you, I know a lot of people have asked me yeah, the Comic-Con is there. We're going to be at the Comic-Con. So there's going to be a ton of stuff for families to do. So if you want to bring your families up for 4th of July weekend, we got the Syracuse Mets, which are the AAA team for the New York Mets. And actually you could come see Tim Tebow play. He's playing on, I watched him Sunday, man. He's really good.
I
And
just
so-
didn't know he still existed is all.
yeah, he does. He plays for
It's
the
fine.
Mets. Yeah.
Wow.
Right
Well,
here in
Mets-
Syracuse.
He plays for the
So,
Mets farm system.
but still,
Yeah.
you get to watch him play. So they got a game Friday night and Saturday night after the Legion event on Saturday. So you could go catch a baseball game with the family. There's going to be fireworks all weekend because of 4th of July. There's going to be a full on carnival at the Comic-Con, which is going to be crazy. So it's just going to be insane.
I'm stoked. So excited.
It's gonna be great.
And lots of fun things to do over there.
And all 4 of us are
Yeah.
gonna be there. It'll be a great time.
That's right. Plus Evan and Nick from my podcast, Brendan, our high marshal, who's pretty much high marshaling every event ever created for Legion ever. He'll be there. And a lot of the other personalities from different podcasts and blogs and stuff will be there. I think I want to do Saturday night since we're ending a little bit early. I think in the evening sometime I want to do like a meet and greet where we all meet up at like a bar or a restaurant or something and get together, and you guys can come say hi and ask us questions or just talk to us or whatever you guys want to do.
This is kind of spur of the moment, but how do you feel about
Sure.
Tully's for that? Because I want me some tenders.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Wherever Dash wants to go, that's where we go.
I
How's
am
that?
the overlord. That's how this
Yep.
works.
Yeah. Yep. He is
All
in
right.
charge.
Maybe we'll go for Tully's tenders afterwards. That'll be good.
Out of all the places in Syracuse.
Look, man, those tenders are to die for. Every time I go back home, that's what I go get. Tully's
All right,
tenders
man.
every time.
All right, we get it.
Okay.
Good Lord.
Good.
Yeah. Tully's tenders. All right, fine.
Notorious Scoundrels brought to you by
Hey, man.
By Tully.
Free advertising. All
Can
right.
we send them an invoice after
Yeah,
this?
can we just
They
bill
might
them?
pay it.
We'll just bill them.
They are like a sports bar type deal. Legion's sort of like a, I don't know, tabletop sport.
No.
So, hey, man,
Mm,
don't be doubting. This is what we do.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
It is ridiculous. You do have to get tenders. We gotta get these guys salt potatoes. I got a whole dossier of foods that I'm gonna have to stuff your mouths with. So we'll get there.
It's not a list, not a notebook, a dossier.
dossier.
Yeah, that's right.
I would have
That's
gone with smorgasbord, but that's okay.
Hey, whatever you want, buddy.
So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, let's come back from the weeds here.
Weeds. I thought
Yeah.
there's food here, not weeds.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think
Oh.
we're gonna talk about some games and tournament results since last episode. I personally haven't actually played a game since last episode. How about you guys?
I can't remember if my first Elam's game for Invader was before last episode or afterwards, but that was my most recent game.
And you,
I've been vacillating between Wookiees and some other lists like Leia, crazy Leia spam lists that don't have Luke at all. So I've had some fun with those. Those have been
now are
great.
they crazy because they don't have Luke, or are they crazy because they're Leia spam lists?
They're just stuff people don't remember how to fight anymore, like fleets with strict orders, or like rotaries, or I'm trying flame RTs in my next one. Look out,
I love
flame
flame
RTs.
Hey, I love me some Flame RTs, man.
Yeah. But yeah, just
Can we talk for a minute about how good strict orders is?
why not? Yeah.
Just generally, because I'm glad you brought it up, because it's one of the cards that I thought was like maybe not. It was like okay to not great, and I think it's a lot better than I give it credit for. How's it been working out in your games?
Well, there's two or three scenarios where I think it's best, and number one I think is anytime you have a unit that is on the panic threshold, strict orders guarantees you won't panic because you have the ability to just remove the suppression that would have put you over threshold. The other use that I found for it is when you have units that desperately want an action that might get shot that don't start the turn suppressed. Then you can guarantee that you yank instead of relying on the randomness to get those units into their second action. And the third scenario, kind of an edge case, and something that I've pulled off only one time. You take Leia's 3-pip, which gives you the ability to do 2 activations in a row, and you chain that together with her Inspire 2 on a unit that's been buried. So you activate Leia, Inspire, do Leia's thing, and then that unit activates and pulls a third suppression automatically because of you have strict. So it's just a way to sort of unbury a unit like instantly with that strict orders combo. And Leia's card typically is pretty slow, and it kind of gets around like the problem with Inspire because the game is an I go, you go. You'll inspire someone, and then your opponent gets to activate, and they shoot them anyway, so they have another suppression on them. But this kind of gets around that issue, and strict can get around that generally if they only get shot one time, you get the same effect. So those are like the 3 scenarios that I found that are super useful, just on Leia specifically and Leia spam. But I mean, you could apply it to any number of scenarios. Anytime you have a lot of face-ups, so like entire Legion. Luke Skywalker with 3-pip with the extra suppression removal in addition to strict orders. There's all kinds of good places you could use that card.
Yeah, and it's actually like if you're running a coordinated fire build for Empire, it's really solid in that situation because your core units are getting orders anyway, and it basically prevents them from being suppressed to lose that aim action to build aim tokens. So I've used it in that context, at least in round robin for Invader.
Yeah, and I mean it's custom. It seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it was custom built for Krennic and Death Troopers, right? Like you put strict orders with compel on Krennic, and then the Death Troopers being able to pull, a suppression off themselves when they get issued an order. It's just really
it makes it pretty hard to stack suppression on your Death Troopers because they're pulling up 2 suppression every turn.
Mm-hmm.
3, right?
Just discipline 1.
Discipline 1.
Yeah, IRG are discipline 2.
Yeah. But yeah, and then compel with some other units. I mean, and the strict orders so that you can get the compel. I mean, it's just so good.
Yeah, I feel like the lower the courage, the better it is, though, because you're trying to get you're trying to go from either 2 to 1 to prevent panic or 1 to 0 to restore actions. But I guess it depends on context more than just how much courage it has. Like for example, if you have a commander who's on the verge of panic, then it doesn't matter, how many they have. You could just guarantee that you don't panic, even if you lose an action.
Yeah.
And you still have that.
Like if you've got Luke on like 6 suppression tokens, you definitely just rip one off. I think.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know. I think that
I don't know.
The 100% chance to not panic versus like you're still like high likelihood that you're still only getting one action.
Right. And that's exactly the situation that happened to me. Well, the one time I remembered to do it, the other time I got burned and decided to roll it and failed it. And I was like, oh my God, I could have just stricted it and I would have been safe. But it's really clutch when you are up against it, say against, saboteurs, and then Krennic plays Annihilation Looms on 5 and you suddenly have 4 suppression on your entire freaking army. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the ideology that Kyle, you had been talking about, I think in one of our previous episodes and one of your articles about like managing risk, right? So like strict orders takes the die roll out of the picture, so you don't have to worry about chance being a thing anymore. And just being able to have that ability is huge.
So yeah, generally speaking, like you guys were saying, the lower the courage value and the less tokens you have, the more effective it is. And actually, one of the many things up on the site, SDB Legion Odds, is suppression tables, which will tell you like what your chances of clearing a given number of suppression based on how many tokens you have. So, for example, if you have 2 suppression tokens, you've got a roughly 55% chance to clear 1 token. If you have 3 tokens, you've got like a 70-something% chance to clear at least 1 token. So it's good to know those numbers, but it also means like with strict orders, if you've got just 1 suppression on a courage 1 unit, you've only got a 1 in 3 chance, 33% to clear that token. Whereas if you apply strict orders to them, obviously you have a 100% chance to clear that one token. So that's why it's especially good with cards like Coordinated Fire and Covering Fire, where you're giving orders to core units anyway. And they're the ones that benefit from it most. But it also works great on like Courage 2 Special Forces units that you generally want to have 2 actions like Death Troopers. I think it's good on Biston Pathfinders because you actually don't want to stack a lot of suppression on Biston since he needs to be able to recover. So it allows you to take duck and cover on them, go up to 2 suppression when you get shot and then strict back down to 1 so that you can take that recover action and shoot with Biston. So it's definitely not like a use this in every build card, but if you've got a build that's well designed for it, it works pretty well. So,
well, I think it opens up your options too in turn 0, like especially with hostile environment. So now you're not as nervous about taking, hostile environment is a lot more attractive if you're running strict orders because then you have a little bit more of activation control in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. It gives you an extra way to remove suppression, especially like if your dudes aren't in base contact with terrain. So,
yeah, the specific combo that I found for Leia in this case, you're just saying you don't take it in every list. Well, here's a good example. I just wanted to offer the example I found. Basically, it's Leia Chewie, and you have like extra man fleets who, have a notoriously hard time getting into range. So generally speaking, you'll probably be okay if you have a heavy cover place to park them. They'll take a shot maybe, but the idea is you have Chewie back there to sort of soak it up, and then strict there to remove the suppression, like without any sort of random element in there. And then they just go for it. They have their full actions to just fire away or fire and run. So that's just how I'm using it. So I mean, you can find any number of combinations exist in the game that enables you to get those. Otherwise, fleets with no actions are just saddest things ever. They're just 78 points of nothing. So.
I found too, like it's really good with helping you hold objectives late game as well, where let's say I have a set of stormtroopers that are holding an objective and I know they're going to end up having 4 suppression on them, which would make them panic if they were within 3 of Krennic or Veers. But now with strict orders, I pull one off, they're not going to panic. They still get an action and they're going to hold that objective through their activation.
Yep. The one major limitation of strict as it relates to core units is that typically you're not giving orders to core units. But like David said, if you've got, just Leia, Chewie, and then fleets on your 3-pip turns, you've got an extra order to throw around. Or also if you're running Krennic or Palpatine, you've got Entourage, which means that you have a free order, and then typically you have 1 or 2 extra orders to throw around on a given turn. So,
yeah.
In my match, it was actually Leia Krennic, and I knew he was going to play Voracious, so I played Push instead and put face-ups on both the fleets. And then he just shot me once, Chewie guarding it off, and it just did nothing to me. Plus, I saved my 1 pip for the turns where he doesn't have Voracious. So that was
if you can call the Voracious Ambition play and just essentially concede initiative, you can get it back later. It's I've had this happen playing as Krennic. Like if you get in a cycle where you're basically losing initiative to cunning every single turn, like that's real bad because
you are probably
like
dead.
It's very possible that it happens that you play your 1 pip, he plays his 1 pip. You play your 2 pip, he plays his 2 pip. You play your 3 pip, he plays his 3 pip, and every single time you lose to cunning. That's not a cycle you want to be in.
You lose to cunning because the DTs are alphaing you, probably.
Right.
It's the biggest reason.
DTs should go first.
Yeah.
Speaking of DTs and Krennic, Jay, I think we have some talking to do.
Yeah.
Because I believe you went up to a tournament in Rochester this weekend that was labeled as an RPQ.
Not only was it labeled as one, it was one.
So look at that. And you won.
Yes. Yep. It was a really good tournament. We had a bunch of the local guys, but then we also had Stevens from the Discord drove up from Maryland. one of the other guys from Discord, I think it's Stacy82 or whatever. He's from Michael. He's from Pennsylvania. He drove up for it. Plus, we had a bunch of guys locally from Rochester, Buffalo, and Syracuse all come out, and so it was a really good turnout. Beautiful store. Just Games out in Rochester, amazing store. So it was that the turnout was great, the store was good, the competition was good, and yeah, I ultimately prevailed.
Nice.
So yeah,
So-
it was good.
What list were you running?
Yeah, so I was running Krennic Veers. I had Veers naked, Krennic had strict orders. Then I had 4 Stormtrooper DLT squads. Then I ran 2 Death Trooper squads. They had the DLT Hunter, Recon Intel, and then the config, the focus fire config, or the other one there. And then one of them had comms relay on it, and then I ran 2 snipers. So 10 activations altogether.
Not gonna lie, that sounds brutal.
It is. It's, it's one of those things where I think with the 3 sniper lists, you get concerned with death troopers, right? Because they're going to be aiming at the death troopers. So with this list, you have a couple things going for you in that regard. Number one, the recon intel helps you get into positions of line of sight blocking with the death troopers for the most part, if it's favorable terrain. And then with Veers and the 2 snipers, you're handing out aim tokens to the snipers, and then generally you can get, if you're lucky, you can get a maximum firepower out, try to delete one of the snipers, and then keep your 2 snipers out of line of sight during turn 1, give them the aims, and then pop them out when they've popped out their snipers, and just kind of counter their snipers, and it slows them down from really getting to the death troopers. I've found that has been my experience.
You were not running a medic.
No. Medics are for people who can't handle Legion.
Jay's spitting fire. You hear that, everybody? Medics are for people who can't handle Legion.
No, I think I get why they're in the meta right now, and I understand, and it's super frustrating, especially the medic sniper combo. So I mean, I totally get it, but I find that a lot of people, and I haven't played some of the higher level guys that play the medics, but a lot of people, I find it's a wasted activation. Like you're like wasting this whole unit in the backfield that could be making a push or doing something else for you, when if you were playing maybe it's hard to play with snipers, but if you're playing a little bit better with snipers, that maybe that unit could be doing something else.
Dave, you look like you're in pain. What's going on?
I'm just blowing a gasket because, like, who puts a medic on a naked squad? Put it on a damn DLT. It's a free action, and it's an extra wound. Like, come on.
Yeah, I get it. It's just tough, man. Like, and I mean, even the astromechs, right? Like, I find the same thing where, and once again, maybe there's somebody out there that's a genius with this stuff that I haven't seen yet, but it just, they seem like more of a, I'm going to follow the tank or the ATST, and I'm going to sacrifice some ability at shooting in order to stay with the ATST or the snipers or what have you,
Yeah, I mean,
Your DLT's range 4.
the astromech, I think, is in kind of a unique situation because the thing that it's keeping alive is not super good. Generally,
Right.
Usually. I think the tank is a little bit of an exception to that. But yeah.
Clearly the meta with the tank hasn't shook out yet. Did you play any tanks this weekend, Jay?
I did not. I played an ATST. I did not play a tank, though. Somebody had a tank there. Stevens was running a Veers Boba tank list. I didn't end up having to play him, but the tank is good. The ATST is really good now with the pilot that surges to hits. That really changes the ATST. Like the hit ratio that it puts out now is pretty good. But
do you remember off the top of your head what build he ran?
With the ATST?
Yeah, I want to know.
Yeah, so it was actually Evan. It was
nice.
Yeah,
yes.
It was a generic commander. He had the ATST with the mortar, and I think he ended up putting the grenade launcher on it too.
Okay.
Then he ran 2 astromech teams with DLTs. Then he ran a medic stormtrooper team with a DLT and 3 snipers. And then I want to say there was another like 1 or 2 stormtrooper DLTs in there. It was it's a really tough list.
That's strong.
Except for when it runs into death troopers, because they just destroy everything that they look at, because they're amazing.
They're pretty good. And
They're good.
frankly, so I think the biggest thing your list has going for at least at face value is that death trooper redundancy is huge. Like,
yes,
if they shoot at one of your death trooper squads, you're like, okay, well, the other squad's still going to waste you.
Well, and it's almost like I think the first few times I played the list and people started focusing on one of the death troopers and I started losing minis in that unit, I was like, oh no. But then the more I got to play, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Focus on that one while this other one comes around the corner and just murders the rest of your family.
I mean,
yeah, they do
death
that.
troopers are so good.
Just like an Imperial, just jump straight to the war crimes.
I mean, it's in their name.
Yeah, well, hey,
They're
I mean,
death
it was Luke and
troopers.
Leia, yeah.
The death.
That's
death
true.
troopers.
We're not even going to bother.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, we're not going to bother with the soldiers.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not life troopers. They're not. They're
That's
not
true.
peace troopers.
They're not Geneva Convention troopers.
Right. But yeah, I honestly, so my other list that I was running, and I mean, really, since they came out, I don't think I've had a list without the Royal Guard in them, just with the Electro Staff, just to for Force users. But I would say with 2 Death Troopers in your list, like, I don't know, Force users aren't that scary anymore when you're potentially throwing 10 to 12 dice at them. With everything, with an
With
aim
Hunter.
token. Yeah, with Hunter and an aim token, it's and then an extra, so you got 2 aims, 10 dice. It's like, okay, yep, you're going to take at least 4 to 5 wounds.
Deflect is
It
super
is.
scary when you're firing.
Absolutely,
Things with death troopers,
it is. Yeah,
because
I saw some of that
you're like in the territory.
with a
Yeah.
Luke, and I think he ended up deflecting like 1. It was a Luke with emergency stims, and he ended up 2. He deflected 2, so I lost 2 minis, but I killed Luke. In my head, that was a win.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say that's.
Yeah,
a
and
win.
it is.
Yeah.
It
I
totally
can just
is.
see you
I
hitting the
just,
cash
like,
register because that's
if
that's exactly how I would feel.
if you're deflecting into like a full death trooper shot, assuming that you have like heavy cover 2, you're probably deflecting like 1 on average
Yeah.
and taking another wound or 2.
Sure, and I'm completely fine with that, because I think what happens when you're running 2 Death Trooper units is if I kind of run them close to each other, so that they can double up on targets, unless it makes sense to do otherwise. But for the most part, I'm running them very close knit. So then, like in that instance with Luke, I'm like, okay, I don't even care if you get 3 minis, because my next Death Troopers are going to activate next. And you don't have Luke yet, or maybe you do, but you're not going to get away. So we're just going to unload again into you with another unit of these guys. So
Death troopers are pretty good.
they're really good, and I'll argue with anyone who says otherwise. I think I would think they're one of the best units in the game right now. As
no
right
kidding.
now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't. Just,
They have everything. 2 courage, 3 up save, 10 dice.
I mean, they're
all ranges.
they're the Space Marines of Legion, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the weapon combos are just nothing that we have really seen, and the combination of different stuff, like David just said, at all the ranges is just ridiculous. And with with Veers in there, it's like it just gets even better.
Well, let me walk that back. 7 dice at 4
Yeah.
with an exhaust, 7 dice at 3, and then like, what do you roll if you roll the DLT and on all the other 4 dudes? So 8, so 11 at range 2 if you use the.
And then what you
SC-14
do
R.
sometimes is you swap out one of those minis. If you have it on the grenade launcher config, you just put 1 red in, so now it has blast, and then you it's ridiculous.
That is 10 dice with
Yeah.
blast. It's like fleet troopers wish they could hit that hard.
Yeah,
ever.
I mean, it's insane that their like range 4 attack is excellent, and they
Yes.
just get better as they get closer.
Yeah, and I mean, the way and the only way you can counter them is from range, right? So snipers are huge with them, and that's why in my list in particular, I like Veers in the list with 2 snipers. He really helps kind of stop that or slow it down a little bit. Maybe not always stop it, depending on how deployment is for your opponent's snipers, but.
Right, you're just trying to punish your opponent for sniping your DTs,
Yeah.
essentially. It's like, oh, you choose to shoot my DTs, and now I choose to shoot your snipers.
Right,
back.
or if they choose to get into the sniper war early, then you're like, okay, I'm just going to move up my DTs. Like, no problem, guys.
Yeah, you're like marvelous. I love this. I can go where I need to go without worry.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Death Troopers getting better as they get closer. I actually I just did an article on the round robin data from Invader. One of the most surprising things to me, I looked at faction win-loss by objective deployment and condition. So it's a small sample size, but there were 9 games of Rebel versus Empire where limited visibility was used. How many of those games would you guess Rebels won?
I'm gonna guess 2.
2, yeah. Did you read the article?
Whoa, really?
Wow.
I got it right?
Really? Wow.
I haven't even read the article yet.
Yeah.
It's almost like whoever suggested that limited viz was good against DTs was wrong because it prevents your snipers from firing.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's a catch-22. It lets your Lukes and Sabines get closer, but it means your snipers also can't pressure their Death Troopers, and Death Troopers still murder you at range too. So
You took 3 snipers. Why are 134 points of your snipers just useless with your lim viz?
And
So
with it, with that too, with the way they work, and it took me a little bit to kind of figure this out and see it. And Mike, actually, you helped me with this. Is that with the Death Troopers in the list, you don't need Snow Troopers anymore because they are so powerful up close and far away. Like I kept thinking, no, but the Snow Troopers, you can get arguably 3 actions out of them a turn, and with steady. And I'm like, once that, Mike, you and I talked about it, and then I just went to the DLTs and then the 2 Death Troopers. I was like, oh yeah, I don't even miss the Snow Troopers at all. Actually, I'm glad I don't have them in this list.
yeah, once you don't have to close to range 1 to do damage, you're like, oh, this is so much better.
yeah, it's really good. But yeah, not just I want to just say this. It's kind of tooting my own horn, but I was just so happy with it. So at the RPQs, the one I was at, and I think they do it for all of them, but it's 3 rounds and then a top 2. My top 2 game, I can't ever say this. This is the only time I'll ever be able to say it, so I'm just gonna shout it from the rooftops. I played a perfect game. I've never done that before. Like from turn 0 all the way through the end, like I didn't make a single mistake, so I was just really happy. Yeah, I'm gonna breaking my arm to pat myself on the back. Yeah,
Perfect game. Okay, all right.
Well, just because. Okay, so for me, the reason I used to always struggle with turn 0. Making the decisions. I had blue. I was at my list is at 792, so I have an 8-point bid. So I
with 2 Death Troopers.
I picked the right board side. We used my cards. I got the cards I needed. It was we ended up with key positions with blue, which was perfect because the middle favored my side, and then there's this big hunk of terrain between red side and my side. We had long march, which favored me even more, and we had hostile environment. And so like I had the perfect layout, and then my deployment was really good. And I generally, what happens with me is I'll rush, like in the middle of the game. And I think a lot of people do this, is you start deploying and then you see what your opponent's doing and you try to counter what they're doing instead of sticking with your original plan. And you start to rush and put your units into positions they shouldn't be in. And I held that instinct back, I guess. And so I don't know, I was just happy with myself that I've never been able to do that in a game. I always make some sort of dumb mistake. And so I'm going to shout it from the rooftop. I did it, guys. I did it. It's the
Good
only
job,
one
Jay.
I'll ever have ever, but I
That's
did
not
it.
true. That's not true. You only get better. You only get
Yeah,
better.
and now you get to go to Worlds in, I think it's at Adepticon, right?
Which,
Has that been confirmed?
Yes, it's on the card that I got.
Okay.
And it says
There you go.
High Command, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's just wrong.
2020
I
High
think,
Command.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's one.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
I think Worlds is called High Command.
Yeah,
Check.
I think it's basically just one event now.
Yeah. Here's the effed up part, really, about this whole thing is that, well, all of us who get the RPQs now, we have to keep that card safe because that's your only entry in. I think is having that card with your name on it.
They didn't like collect your email or anything.
No.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's just a card with my name in Sharpie. So
hold on your golden tickets.
Yeah, it's a little concerning, especially. I mean, it was. I was exhausted. Like, we didn't end up getting out of there till like 11, but like, he handed it to me, and I put it away in the token bag, and then for like 5 minutes, for like not 5 minutes, but like 5 seconds, I was like, oh my god, what did I do with that card? And then, but yeah, I was like freaking out because you lose that, I don't think you get in.
That's interesting. Well, hopefully organized play will maybe clarify how this process is going to work this year. But that'd be good.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah. And then, for anybody who's thinking about going, like, the trophy for first place is super cool, and there was the top 8 got handouts and stuff, so prize support was pretty okay for what it was.
Cool. Well,
Thanks.
Excited for you.
Yeah, buddy.
I want you to sign the Burger King crown they gave you.
So that was my opponent Nick, and I. We that was what we were most concerned about. We were playing for the crown, so we put that on the side of the table. We're like, winner gets the crown.
Can you put that on display at the Northeast Open?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
you got it.
Good,
but
a Burger King crown signed by Jay Shalansky himself.
Trying to think.
Totally
there's some neat lists there overall. So the guy who played in the final 2, he played a Luke. Nick Gardner is his name. He played a Luke Jin list that it was really good. He's really good with Jin, and so he actually, I believe he played Stevens in round 3. And then made it into the finals, and he has a really solid list with Jin, and he just knows how to use her properly, which is not very common, with Jin. So,
well, could you explain what that looked like? Because Jin is hot garbage.
So Jin is good at tanking, and she's good at distracting your opponent's units. So if you don't drop her stupidly into the open, or just because she can infiltrate, if you put her somewhere decent and then start walking her around it, corners, and basically jumping guys as they're coming around corners, or using your the terrain and stuff to continue to keep her from having heavy cover, she's just a really good distraction. Like, she doesn't delete a lot of units, but she could put a lot of suppression on units. She'll get rid of 1 mini usually with Pierce, but then she's just, you start basically getting distracted and you start shooting into Jin, and she can just eat most of that, and it, you know what I mean? So she's just a good kind of tanking option for distraction, I think.
So I guess
that's the mistake.
So I guess the way I feel about Jin is that the first couple times you play against her, you shoot her a ton, and you're like, oh my god, she tanks, and then once you figure that out, you're like, okay, I'm just not going to shoot Jin, and then she doesn't do anything. Has been my experience.
I would say that's true. I would say similar to like Veers and Krennic. I think they're good late game units where like round 5 and 6, you have two units that have 5 or 6 health, and you just go plop them on a position and you go, yep, this is mine now. Where Jin is the same way. If you kind of can put her into a position where she can come in round 5, even 4, maybe depending on the time, but 5 or 6, and just hold an objective, you're going to be hard pressed to get that objective away from her.
Yeah, I mean, that's all true. Um, the last time that I fought her, I just punched her to death with the rebel troopers.
Yeah,
Like that taunt was awful. Like most Jins don't take tenacity to prop it up, so it's only generating 2.5 hits average and unaimed because she wants to take the dodge. So all you got to do is just tie her up in melee with the rebel troopers and dodge, and maybe she'll kill one, maybe.
Oh, let's back up. Why are you taking the dodge action with Jin?
Because you want to keep her alive because she doesn't want to die in melee because all of her danger sense is off when she's in melee.
Doesn't she have a much better keyword for that?
No.
Quick thinking.
Oh yeah. Okay, never mind.
But
well, I don't know, man.
It's a valid point though, right? Like she's very weak in melee, and her damage generally is pretty poor. So you either ignore her or you tie her up with something. Part of the problem is that in Rebel mirrors, she's extremely weak to the number 1 Rebel unit, Luke Skywalker. So
yeah.
See, I guess I saw more of like she's just a pain in the butt, because if you do it where you're kind of popping in and out and you're not just like full bore, it's a weird. Okay, so I guess we said tanking, but like tanking implies you're just running straight at enemy units, right? But like if you do it in a way where you're popping in and out of line of sight and cover and stuff, she's just like a thorn in your side, and she's going to pop out and pierce some stuff. She's going to hold an objective. Like, I think that's the way you play her. And in his list, he has Luke, and then he had Z6 squads with frag grenades and then 3 snipers. And so she's just a pain in the butt while the other stuff is moving up and going to start deleting some of your things.
Z6
and she's
frags.
Yeah, that's I didn't think it was going to be good, but it is. Because you just come up and you throw frags and hit them with a Z6 at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super powerful attack. It's just like when our Rebel Troopers ever at range 1 of anything. And not dead.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. They couldn't ever get to range 1 because your Death Trooper should have just shot them in the face.
I would normally agree with you, except for depending on board state, right? Like sometimes they can get close, and sometimes and if you can get them up there and get them in line of sight and enough cover, they can hold an objective with those frags. And when you try to take it with any other unit, they're just like, oh, here's 4 to 5 frags and then a Z6 at your face.
Yeah, I mean, it does generate like 6 or 7 hits, which is pretty ridiculous.
It's a Death Trooper shot.
It's just a question of getting them there.
Which is great.
Right.
It's just it's range 1 instead of range 4.
Right.
What was the terrain like, real quick?
Before we actually, the 3. Let's see. So they had 6 tables. 3 out of the 6 tables were really, really good. They had a lot of Imperial trains stuff that they 3D printed, and so it was really good. They set up the boards nice, but then there's a couple boards that they had run out of like Star Wars terrain, and they were using other ones. And so like one of my games was another. I played 2 Rebel lists. It was a Wonder Twins list with Wookiees, 2 fleets, 2 snipers, and then Z6. And it was like these shipping crates, like a bunch of shipping crates.
I saw that map.
Yeah.
That map, I took one look at it and I was like, there's so much line of sight blocking terrain on this map. It's insane.
So I played that against the fleet list on that map, which was really, really tough. And that was actually that, and the last game for the first place were my 2 toughest games were against Rebels. And but what had happened was those containers were short. So you could see Luke Skywalker's lightsaber over the top, and you could see the Wookiees thing over the top. So I was just like, oh, I'm going to shoot him now. and just deleted Luke Skywalker and then deleted the Wookiees with the Death Troopers.
You see, no one gave the Wookiee leader the memo that putting your sword up over your head means you're a freaking lightning rod for blaster fire.
Not only do your saves suck, guys, but everyone can shoot you always.
Yeah, because your leader's like 9 feet tall with his arm in the
But
air.
I'll say even with that, that game went to MOV, and because his fleets were like, it was the perfect board setup for his fleets. And they were just like, they would come around a crate and just be like, here's a ton of dice. See ya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine Deploy the Garrison was excellent that game.
Yes, it was.
Would be my guess.
Yeah.
Stand by on a map like that.
So, yeah, it was fun. It was cool. I mean, I think, oh gosh, there was 4 lists that had vehicles in them. So I think vehicles are definitely the new hotness now. I think we're going to see more vehicles.
Yeah, I think
the ATST with that new pilot is super good too now. Not great, but much better.
If you're going to a tournament right now without impact, I think you're probably making a poor choice.
I would agree 100% with that.
Yeah, you need a little something.
Kind of ability.
I mean, C6s are sort of like kind of impact, but not really. Yeah, totally.
Very unreliable. Yeah.
The tank has mercy on you for having such large sides.
Yeah, the side shots on the tank.
Specifically with snipers.
They do work.
Yeah, with Z's especially.
Yep.
Yeah, snipers, yeah. But ATSD, that's why I think the ATSD is a stronger vehicle. It is 50 points more expensive, roughly speaking, but still, you can get a lot out of it now with the Surge pilot. You can get a lot of mileage.
So we want to move on here to bullet point number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like we're talking about slow play and chess clocks today. I hate the idea of chess clocks.
All right.
I'm going to open there.
So do we want to put this in context a little bit? Is that unnecessary?
Sure. No, I mean, I think let's put it in context.
All right. So, LVO and Adepticon were a while ago, but there were a not insignificant number of games that did not play 6 turns. In both situations, it got a little bit better for Adepticon than it did for LVO because the round times were a little bit longer, but still a lot of games not going to 6 turns. I'm like a big proponent of, game was meant to be played 6 turns, and you got to do whatever you need to do to make sure that it is 6 turns. The units are balanced around a 6-turn game, right? Like, one of the reasons that Vader gets frowned upon is because he does most of his impact in the later turns of the game, because it takes him a while to get to the action, but then he's a high impact unit once he gets there. Just as an example. So, and then in Vader League, actually, we now have a time limit on the games, and there were several games recently where there were some very short games in terms of turn length, and particularly in a way that seemed to benefit the player that was taking longer. So usually when you refer to slow play, that's what you're talking about, right? Somebody that, whether intentionally or not, is taking a long time and stands to benefit from the game not finishing. So one of the ways to address that is chess clocks, which are always brought up as a solution. The other way is just to either extend or remove time limits, but of course that doesn't necessarily completely fix the intentional slow play issue. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Why do you hate chess clocks?
I hate chess clocks just generally because I think they are intrusive. I think they are just kind of unwieldy in this format. It's not like we're playing chess where you're taking one action, like one move, and you swap it back. It's like, okay, I'm gonna you hit your chess clock. I take a move. Like let's say I trigger a standby. Like if I trigger the standby and you're deciding it, like is that during my turn? Is that during your turn? I think there's just a lot of gray areas when it comes to this game that don't work super well for chess clocks. And the standby is just one example. But like, when your opponent's rolling defense dice, is that your time or is that their time? Like if they take an extra 20 seconds to pick up their dice and do that, like whose time is that eating? Just little things like that, can add up. And I don't think that we can accurately track time as well as we think we can when it comes to this game in terms of who's using what time.
I think it's very doable personally. 40K uses chess clocks, and 40K has a lot more ambiguous situations than Legion does. Like in the situations you described, defense dice, using standby, things like that, you tap the clock, right? You roll your attack dice, you tap the clock. Your opponent rolls their defense dice, they tap it back. Put the chess clock right next to the dice tray. There's a lot of tapping. It takes practice, but the only situations I can really think of, like where it's truly a question as to whose time should you use, are like when you're choosing command cards, which is kind of shared time. I would say like as soon as one person puts a card down on the table, they tap the clock. Like in that instance, it seems like the question of whose time are we using at a given moment in the game seems like a solvable problem with some discussion and practice.
So I sort of agree. So I guess like let me bring up the standby situation again, right? So you move your unit, right? And you're on the clock. So does your opponent then have to tell you to, like, do they have to click the clock for you to tell you that it's not your turn anymore? Even though they don't know that they're going to do it or not.
I think you have to decide whether or not you're going to do it, and your opponent moves their unit. Like you've got a window to decide, and that window's not very long.
Yeah. See, things like that, I think it's kind of like, I don't know. That's kind of a feel bad, I think, on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, you gotta. There's a little bit of good with the bad, and you have to be constantly communicating with your opponent, which you tend to do anyway. Like if your opponent has a standby on the table, you're generally going to be aware that they have that standby, and if you're moving within range of it, you're going to be aware that there's a chance they might want to use it. So as you're moving your units, say I'm moving into standby range, right? Do you want to use it? Like as you're, it takes a few seconds to pick dudes up and put the movement tool down. So I think, like anything else, it's a situation that's solvable by reasonable people. Maybe we're making too many assumptions that people will be reasonable, but
yeah. To that end, I also am like just like a big proponent of like if there are two people who are playing that know the game, there's no reason they should need a chess clock. They should be able to finish in 6 turns within the 2 hour and 15-minute time limit. Like no questions asked.
I agree generally, but like the recent Invader situations have highlighted, these are in both of these games that I'm referencing here. The players are all very experienced Legion players, and like there was one situation where a move shoot with a Stormtrooper unit took 7 minutes.
Yeah, so I feel strongly that those situations, and specifically in games like Invader situations where there are active people watching the games, like players that take 7 minutes on a Stormtrooper move and shoot should be issued a warning. Hands down, no questions asked. That's unacceptable.
So at what point, like suppose you're the other player and your opponent seems to be taking a while doing it. Obviously you can't quantify a 7-minute interaction like in the moment.
Sure.
It feels like it's taking a while. At what point is it okay to be like, I want to call a judge because I think you're slow playing?
I think the second that you start thinking about it and then you think about it again, if you think about it once and it's even if it's like a couple turns before, if the fact that you're thinking about it is a thing and then you like let it go away and you think about it again, Like, that should be it. You should just call a judge. You should just
See,
get them involved.
To me, like, chess clocks remove kind of the awkwardness and confrontation around those kind of situations. Because, like, if you want to take 7 minutes to move shoot at Stormtrooper unit, and you got a chess clock and you're eating your time, fine. Like, there's a completely objective measure for how long that's going to take you. It's the clock, and when you run out of time, there's a clear consequence. Your opponent doesn't have to say anything. They don't have to initiate a conflict with you. They don't have to call a judge. It's there. It removes, because right now I think there's understandably a lot of awkwardness around calling someone on slow play, because you're instantly changing the dynamic of a game when you say, I need you to hurry up. I think you're slow playing. I want to call a judge. Like, that completely changes the social dynamic of a game. And I think that is rendered essentially unnecessary if you use chess clocks.
Well, I mean, I think that we need to be able to have a decent conversation about it, right? Like, you can't be like, "Hey, I think you're slow playing," right? Like, that's not how you need to talk about it. You need to be like, "Hey, this is taking a while. I'm going to call a judge over just so that we can, like, make sure we move the game along." And I think that if you pose it in the correct manner, it's a non-issue, and your opponent should understand. Especially if we're playing at a tournament level, like, like, having a judge come over and watch your game shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, a lot of people are understandably conflict averse, especially when it comes to things like, I'm calling a judge on you for X, right? Like, this goes back to, should you have to watch your opponent's hands, and should you have to watch their components? Should you have to think about how long they're taking? I'd much rather be focusing on the moves that I'm making and what's going on in the game than all the other stuff.
I think that those are all fair points. I just really don't like chess clocks.
I mean, we're looking at this from a few different angles, right? Like, I think from what I can tell, right, the primary issue is fairness. Right? At what point does your opponent using excessive calculation time impact your ability to win the game, or your ability to play the game, effectively, essentially? So, I mean, all the points that Kyle mentioned about there being a neutral arbiter called the clock for these sorts of things, they're all right on the money. But I think the community as a whole, the competitive community specifically, if they were to adopt this thing, we would have to accept en masse that speed is a skill, and you can now list build with the clock in mind to avoid spending clock too much and then put your opponent in a time crisis, because your list is simpler to execute than theirs. So there's like a macro level, concern that I have with that. But otherwise, I think it might be ultimately a positive thing. I've been in several awkward situations where I thought my opponent was slow playing me, especially with Palpatine, because basically I needed him to get his Now You Will Die underway so I could do the rest of the game without that, hanging over my head. And here he is, calculating forever and ever. So it just removes the awkwardness, in my opinion, just the awkwardness. And like you say, Kyle, it changes the dynamic of the game when you call someone out for it. We immediately move away from fun to, hey, you're trying to get one over on me, conflict level of interaction. And so I guess, if we want to keep the competition fun and lighthearted, which I think we're all interested in doing, then we need the neutral arbiter.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, don't get me wrong, I would much rather have a situation where you finish 6 turns and you're not playing with the clock. But in a tournament setting where you have a limited amount of time in the day, it's sort of a necessary evil, potentially, if you want to guarantee that games finish 6 turns, which I think should be the goal. But, in an ideal situation, you do like 3-hour rounds and you do 2 days of a tournament. I would much rather do that, get to like have fun with my opponent a little bit, have a beer delivered to my table. Is that going to be a thing at Neo, Jay? Because that sounds like that should be a thing.
Beer delivery?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure.
It's like,
I'm sure we could make it a thing. Sure. Yeah. That's the ticket.
All right,
There's
let's table
definitely
that.
beer there.
As your
so I'm
overlord,
sure we
yes,
could
it's
get it
going to be a
delivered to a
thing.
table. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Awesome.
So on this topic of fun, because that seems to be like a recurring thing of chess clocks. I actually think that chess clocks are way less fun, and I think they take a lot of it out of it. All of a sudden, you're like, "Oh man, I'm on the clock. I have to do this thing. I have to tap the clock. I have to play quickly, more quickly than I would normally have to, even if I were to like play at a normal pace and be able to finish within a 6 hour game. Not 6 hours. A 6 round game, right? 6 hours. That's crazy.
I love it.
I slow play every time. But like 6 rounds in 2 hours 15 minutes. Like if I'm on the clock, I'm gonna be automatically pressured to play quicker than I normally do, and I already play quick enough to like finish a game within that interval. And I think that takes away the banter. It takes away the fun. Like you're gonna be more worried about the clock than having a good time with your opponent, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely ups the on the swinging pendulum of competitive versus fun. It definitely pushes it further to competitive.
Yeah.
Right now, obviously, those two things are not mutually exclusive.
No, absolutely not.
But it certainly leaves less time for conversation.
Yeah, and I guess what I would like to say is I would rather have one game that's crappy and unsociable during the day than 4 games that are significantly less sociable than normal.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the ideal solution is just to do multi-day tournaments and have longer rounds, 3-hour rounds. But personally, I think I think an incomplete game is not in my opinion, complete result. And if you need to like create a way where you're guaranteeing that games finish, it's a necessary evil, in my opinion. But
I'm okay with less banter, frankly, because I think banter is an underhanded tactic. That's just my opinion.
Well, it can be.
I mean, that's
just like my
fair.
opinion, man.
I mean, yeah, some people totally use that to kind of like distract you. I mean, I know that like there have been several games where I'll like try and like bait my opponent into making a really bad move. I'm like, hey man, you shouldn't do that. Or you should do that. Because I don't know. I like the bluffing game. I like kind of like playing with people. That's just a thing I do.
I don't do that.
And
but
yeah, that's
I get that that's a thing.
That's like the Magic player in me that like wants to like bluff their hand and like bluff what they've got and like bluff what they're doing on the board.
Oh.
But so I kind of like just like the banter.
Yeah, but Legion isn't poker. I mean, is it? I don't know.
Well, it is if you're playing Han.
Well,
that's true. It is poker.
I mean, I think that we haven't talked about stuff like this a ton, but I think there is a value in being able to put your units and positions in such a way that it is ambiguous as to what your next few moves are going to be.
That's absolutely true.
And so I think to that extent, it is significantly like poker in that you can, to a certain extent, hide what your strategy is going to be for rounds 4, 5, and 6 in given circumstances. And in those circumstances, I like to bluff people and bait them around. Because, you can choose not to listen to me. That's a choice that you can make.
No, I mean you've hit upon something interesting that a rant might be coming in the future on this. That Legion is about making your opponent screw up so that you get into a defensive position.
I mean,
and just grind them down to nothing. That's
just imagine that the ATST that got way better has a megaphone on the side and the upgrade 0 points.
Yeah, there you go.
There is a unit in Star Wars Legion that has a ability with propaganda. Segue? Huh?
Oh yeah, there is.
Whoa!
You see what I did there?
All right,
yeah, I did.
Guys, we're gonna talk about Sabine Wren.
Yeah, and her graffiti.
So I think we got the final spoiler last week, I guess it is now.
Yeah, we got the actual like
and
Sabine full preview article with including the electro whip cord thing. Electro
Yeah.
whip, I think it's called, right?
Yeah, Rebel
Yeah,
Whipcord.
kinda.
Electro grappling line, I think.
Electro grappling line. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not whipcord.
Yeah,
Nope.
I'm not gonna say it's bad, but it's not whipcord. It's not remotely close to whipcord.
All right, so here let's go into what it does and then talk about why it's not whipcord.
Sure.
So it is an action. It is not a free action, and it is an exhaustible card that gives 2 immobilized tokens and 2 suppression tokens to a unit within range 1. So the end effect is the same as whipcord, which is a good effect, right? Like,
well, it's not the same effect. It's close.
Well, you also don't have the disengage,
which is a big piece
right
of Boba's
right.
whipcord.
But the immobilize and suppression is the same.
Yes.
Which is a good effect.
Totally.
Immobilized tokens are good, but yeah, there's a lot of key differences. One being you don't get the free disengage like you do with whipcord. It is not a free action like whipcord is, and it costs points. It's only 5 points, so it's a fairly minimal investment. But it's also a gear slot, which is something that you're using. We'll talk about her loadout here in a minute, but it's something that she's got 2 gear slots, but they are sort of like the 4 slots on Vader. You wish you had 3 or 4. So it's not nothing. It's not quote unquote free like in the sense that a command card is.
No, I think the 5 points that you play for this is the least. So I think there are 3 main components that we need to think about when we're talking about the card. It's 5 points. I don't really think that's a big deal. It's pretty close to 0, as far as like what you get for it. The second resource we need to talk about is the gear slot that you brought up. It's a very competitive slot on her, because I think it stims recon, and I think the shield is also in that slot too. Yeah, and the third thing, and I think the most important and most expensive portion of this is that it costs an action, and Sabine Wren is a Courage 2 unit that is often suppressed and using Dauntless, which means that if you are taking 2 actions, you are always moving and X. And if you are moving and grappling, you are not moving and swinging your Darksaber.
Or shooting.
Or shooting or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge cost to this card.
I agree.
I'm smirking because I think your shooting's terrible, but that's just
I don't.
me.
I think it's
I know. I get a lot of
we'll get into that. Let's finish talking about the cord and then talk about loadout, and then we can talk about how not terrible her shooting is. So
you mean how terrible her shooting is?
Yeah, it's kind of like the situations where you're gonna need it are potentially great. Like she does have a card that gives her a free recover, so conceivably she can use it twice without having to spend another action to recover, which is nice. I do find, at least, so I've been playing around with her on TTS in Luke Sabine lists, and I do find that typically I want to play that 2-pip, the graffiti token, early, because it's, at least in that particular build, it's a card where you're not giving Luke an order, and the best time to not give Luke an order is early.
Can we also talk about what, like, the effect on that card is way better if you play it on turn 1 as opposed to turn 3 or 4, because it's static.
The graffiti token?
It's static and it stays the entire game. So if you're generating way more value if you're placing that somewhere where your units are getting value out of it from turns 1 through 6 as opposed to turns 4 through 6. Just as a minor aside to the Luke order deal.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, that's a long way of saying you're probably only using this thing once. Now that said, that might be a situation where you're rooting Luke in place if you're facing a mirror with Luke, It might be a situation where you're rooting a core unit in place that needs to score, like on intercept or run away with a box or something. Like there are some very specific and critically important possible uses for it. But it's also possible that you go the entire game and you never use it because she's spending her very precious actions doing all sorts of other things and it never comes up.
For those unfamiliar with the slang, rooting is short for entangling roots, which means freezing someone in
Yeah,
place.
sorry. For those that didn't
Yeah.
grow up playing World of Warcraft, like I think that we all did.
Yeah.
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 It is 5 points worth of flexibility, for sure.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Is it? I don't know.
So you want to talk about the things that it's competing with and the merits thereof?
As far as the gear slots go?
The gear slots, yeah.
So we've got stims for starters on a 5 health, 45 point unit with the Darksaber. How much is she? Ish.
Yeah. Well, even without Darksaber, she's 125.
Okay. So she's like 150
so-
something after Darksaber and stims, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
Yeah.
you know, you've got a 150 point unit that has 5 health. Stims are a big deal. You should take them.
Yeah. I think they're almost as mandatory on her as they are on Luke.
Yeah, and similarly, it's like they're mandatory on Boba. Like you don't leave home without them. And I actually think, as far as her gear slots go, this is the one that's non-negotiable.
I agree.
So, and I think it really comes down to you're fighting against recon intel and you're fighting against her shield, which I believe is 10 points. Is that how much it is? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
and I think based on at least what we think the shield does from the stream, I don't think that the shield is in consideration at all for one of those slots. I mean, it's a free block, which is nice, but you're flipping one of your defense dice to a block. It's not like an extra block.
Yeah, and do you have to exhaust it?
And it's exhaustible.
Yeah.
So
she's already
it doesn't-
pretty defensible
Yeah.
with nimble and Mandalorian armor.
Yeah, it seems not worth the 10 points and or the gear
Yeah.
slot. So really, you're talking about recon intel, basically.
Yeah. And I think that that's a reasonable argument. Like, tossing Whipcord on her for an extra 3 points over recon is fine. I do think that recon is much better on her than it is on Luke or Boba, just for the fact that she's suppressed more often, and that extra 4 inches of movement can really make a difference.
Yeah, and it allows you to potentially grab the box on turn 1 on a lot of deployments.
Yeah, there is also that. Being able to Boba grab is huge. Though, I will say, I think that without Whipcord, that also can be tough. Like, without a free action Whipcord, sometimes that is dicey.
Oh, getting away?
Yeah.
Agreed. Especially if you're running up against, Palpatine or Krennic, where they're guaranteed to be able to win priority on turn 2 if they want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are uses for it, Certainly if you're running up against a list that doesn't have that kind of auto priority win ability, potentially you can grab that box and get away with it, and then then your opponent's chasing Sabine around the map, which is hard.
Yeah, it's not fun. I've
Yeah.
successfully done the box grab with Sabine a couple times now. It's excellent. It's really hard to recover from that.
I see what you did there.
I didn't even mean to do that, but sure.
Nice.
I'll take points where I can get them.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Your brain took over. That was good.
But I don't know. I think it's 5 points that is often going to be wasted. When it's good, it's going to be a slam dunk, and it's going to win you the game. And when it's not that, it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, you're just like there's a strong chance you go the entire game without using it a single time.
Yeah.
Which, for something like that is probably fine. I think
it's only 5 points.
Yeah, I think the gear slot is a more is a bigger barrier to entry, so to speak, than the 5 points.
Yeah, absolutely. The 5 points is like I was saying before, like the least expensive portion of this.
Right.
It might as well be 0 as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
Is it I haven't read the rules lately, but can you put immobilize on vehicles? Is that a thing?
So the short answer is vehicles can be immobilized if the effect allows them to be. Both
Okay.
the electro grappling line and whipcord specify troopers. The target must be a trooper. But like Palpatine gives out immobilized tokens, and he can target vehicles.
That's never came up for me.
You know,
but people also haven't played vehicles.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible for vehicles to get immobilized tokens. I think specifically just with an Now You Will Die at the moment, but
there's a possible update for the harpoon launcher.
Yeah, right.
Never be seen again. Anyway, sorry, that's a bit of a tangent. No, I agree. I think the whip for Sabine is really, really good. And my number one thought is like, wow, I can keep those pesky royal guards from charging my line so freely. If they want to try to get in my face, I can just go last and have Sabine walk up there and whip them and be like, no, you have to shoot your crappy pistols. You can't charge me. That's my favorite use for her so far. But I think against any melee like Luke, Wookiees, like basically saying, you know, I dare you to come close to me because you're going to be frozen potentially for 2 turns when I have a recover in the tank.
Yeah. So I don't know how much it actually matters if this doesn't have disengage on it. I've been kind of like going back and forth on this. So Boba needs to disengage because he sucks in melee. But Sabine's got a lightsaber. you
kind of. I mean, it's a Pierce 1 lightsaber, but it's still, you know, very good in melee, especially if you run tenacity on her. And potentially you could use it to like prevent a unit from withdrawing from Sabine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Because you can't withdraw off your speed 0. You can also use it if you're running Luke Sabine to prevent a unit from withdrawing from Luke. So there are like some, I think like you said, when it's good, it's going to be great. But you know, it's a highly competitive slot for her, that gear slot. So, and it's a highly competitive action for a character that really needs them. So,
and if the shield ends up being good, it's if the shield ends up being good, I think it's a no-brainer that you don't take this personally. Just because that's something you're almost always going to use. It's not like they're never going to shoot Sabine. Like you have to deal with peace on the board. You can't choose to not deal with Sabine, otherwise she's going to trash you.
Right. Yep. So let's. What do you guys think about training upgrades for her? I think there's basically 2 upgrades that are competing for this slot. Endurance and tenacity.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's endurance, and I don't think it's close.
I agree.
Yeah, tenacity's all right, but you know,
it
doesn't do enough for her.
Yeah, I mean, like when we were talking about her, I think before, most units with training slots that are in a melee were like, you should just staple tenacity to them. Everything will be great.
Yeah.
After playing with her a couple times, she just gets suppressed so often, and I've had her panic a few times. You stick endurance on her and be happy with your choices and continue.
Yep. She's a bullet magnet,
yeah.
So she needs that. And she's also, at least, so I've actually been sort of intentionally running the not Darksaber version to see if it's viable. I think the answer is it is. But even when I was running the Darksaber version, I found that she was just not in melee that often anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, even if you are running Darksaber, I think you're probably running it mostly for Dauntless and for the possibility that you might end up getting tied up in melee and want to not suck. But I think you're you know, I view it as you're paying 25 points for Dauntless with the Darksaber.
Yeah, I think the lightsaber is just a bonus.
Yeah, and if that's the case, then you really don't care that much about tenacity. You want to be shedding that suppression so that she's not losing actions. And I think
that's why I'd still take her even if I thought her shooting sucked. I still wouldn't take Darksaber if I had endurance and some semi-reliable way to remove suppression. Like endurance plus strict is pretty darn good.
Yep, and that's actually exactly what Kingsley's running for Actually, I think he is running Tenacity, but he's running Strict. And he's doing Leia Sabine, so he's got the Inspired source there.
Yep.
He's got a Darksaber too, I assume.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Kingsley's got it. He knows his
Yeah.
stuff.
So the debate that's been raging on the Discord is if you're running Sabine, what's better, Luke Sabine or Leia Sabine? And I think that's an open question, which we can get to. But just as far as training upgrades,
the answer is Leia Sabine, because Leia's
I don't know
amazing.
if that's objectively true. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do.
I've been enjoying Luke Sabine, but I can see the case for Leia Sabine. Then the question there is Leia Sabine better than Leia Luke?
Or you could just take all three.
No.
There's no. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, training.
It's good, but it has some problems.
It's got issues
that I can see.
Yeah, as do all of these lists that we've outlined too.
Okay.
In comparison to Wonder Twins, like
as much as I say Empire is OP, I'm going to take a little pause here and say, yeah, Leia 6Z3 Sniper is pretty busted, but it's the only thing we have.
Yeah.
So leave it alone.
Actually, I wrote an article on the subject, not necessarily intending to, but that's what the data bore out for Invader League. I think Rebels are fine. I think their unit mix is boring, but I think that the Rebel units that are good are still really good. Like Z6's snipers, Luke, Leia are still really good. So there's a lot more Empire things that are also good, but that doesn't mean that Rebels should be getting stomped all the time. Anyway, that's a total. Okay.
No.
Well, and let me briefly say, and we're already on like an hour 20 minutes, so maybe we can save this for next week. But I have not yet decided what faction I'm playing for Worlds.
And Troopers in a box outside.
And I would love for you guys to weigh in on that, but not today because that's like a 20-minute long discussion probably.
I have one shot at one fire across the bow. The fact that you haven't chosen already speaks volumes.
Right. I mean, I've done this entire competitive season as Rebels, and I don't have any painted Empire units at the moment. So yes,
that's all I'm going to say.
I'm not disagreeing with you. But I did just finish gluing all my stormtroopers together. So
just roll a dice and be done with it already.
Real men go red.
Speaking of old Blizzard,
right? Are we StarCrafting right now?
All right,
apparently,
should we talk about her command cards real quick?
I don't think we've got to go into super
we don't.
elite detail. I mean,
Explosions is good.
Explosions
really
is
good.
great.
So usually how I sequence them is I'll do like first turn graffiti token. What's that one called? Symbol of rebellion. Just to get it out there, and because it's a higher pip, so if your opponent plays a 1 pip, then you'll get to wait. This is me running Luke Sabine. I think if you're running Luke Leia, you don't play that first turn, but and then potentially she can double move into a turn 2 explosion setup because she's so dang fast. And if not, you can then use your turn 2 and play Legacy Mandalore to do a turn 3 explosion setup. And hopefully you have enough line of sight blocking terrain to do this without her getting pasted by Death Troopers. And then like turn 4 through 6, at least when I'm playing Luke Sabine, that's basically when I dive in then with Luke and I play all of Luke's cards. And by the time your opponent is done dealing with Luke and Sabine, you've still got 5 Z6 units and 3 snipers in the backfield doing stuff. So I've found that to be pretty effective. But yeah, her command card timing, usually, at least in Luke Sabine, I kind of front load her cards and then I play Luke cards later. That's how I've been doing it. That's not necessarily the wrong or right way to do it, but I do like to get explosions out there as quickly as possible because of how devastating it is if you land a good one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that overall, I think the 3 pip and the 2 pip, there's not really a ton to talk about. Like, they're generic cards that hand out tokens. They're like, give you a static buff. But the 1 pip card, I mean, really, like, that's all it does. I mean, it's not anything crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. Yep.
But I think Explosions also has, we haven't seen the territory where it's used as like a deterrent as opposed to a aggressive play. I don't think, or rather, I do think that it's right to use it as like a sab sometimes. I think that's okay.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
I think
I
not
agree.
nearly enough people do that right now.
Well, and a perfect example, right, is the box grab situation. Like if you do that turn one, do a last activation with her, but grab the box. Turn two, you're going to want to play explosions because you need an order on her and you need to win priority. So um, at this point you've claimed the box, right? Throw your mines down in the center. You're probably not going to hit anything with them on that turn. Take your free speed one to move away, and then take a speed three move away, and you're back where you started at the beginning of the game. So
It's like a better No Time for Sorrows wrapped into one
right, it's no
card.
time for sorrows with bombs.
Absolutely. It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like a a token example of when you would not be using it in a way that's aggressive. I mean, it's a free speed one move. Well, it's not free because you have to spend an action to put the bombs down. So it's really like, putting bombs down plus a speed one move. But
well, okay.
well,
It's arm
no, I mean,
plus
like,
arm again plus free speed one move.
no, I mean, like if all you need to do is go somewhere fast, you'll get more distance just taking speed three moves.
No doubt.
Yeah, but
whatever.
yeah, no, I'm just saying. Yeah, I think you almost always want to still put the bombs down.
There's value there that is tangible.
Yep.
You try to pursue me, you walk into my charges.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of times though, if you're gonna explosions, if she's suppressed or something, you like Dauntless doesn't help you.
Right.
So
yeah, because Dauntless has to be your first action.
Right. So you can't like throw the bombs down and then run away. So I think there's a lot of times where explosions, you're like, man, I really don't want to stick my neck out there. So if you just kind of throw them in a more conservative spot, it's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and there's actually, just speaking real quickly of being suppressed in explosions, there's one interaction that's worth highlighting specifically, and that's when you're facing Krennic and Death Troopers. He can play a Voracious Ambition to win priority and suppress you before you can do anything with Sabine. That's when it's helpful to have strict orders, or also your graffiti token down. Like when I'm running Gunslinger Sabine without Darksaber, and I know that I don't have Dauntless as a safety valve, I try and keep Sabine within range of that graffiti token so that she's shedding even more suppression. And we referenced those suppression numbers earlier. If you had, like, suppose that happens and you get double suppressed before she can activate, you've got a 71% chance with 3 dice to clear 1 suppression. So if she's close enough to her graffiti token, you've still got a 70-30 shot to clear one of those 2 tokens and get your full slate of actions. So that's another reason to throw a graffiti token down early. So the builds that she's currently popular in, Luke Sabine and Leia Sabine probably primarily. I don't think I've seen anything else with her.
You're ignoring the bullet point I put in this document, Kyle.
Oh, sorry. Should I? Okay. Luke, Leia Sabine. Yeah, I know. We've talked about this before. I think you're giving up. I think you're giving up too much.
It's okay. We don't have to actually talk about it. It's fine.
Value. Yeah. No. Like, which one pip do you take? Which one pip do you cut?
I think you take explosions and you take coordinated bombardment. I think Son of Skywalker is highly overvalued generally.
I think the fact that it's a 1 pip that gives Luke an order is like super important.
So there's no doubt that there is value in a 1 pip order on Luke. However, in the Luke Sabine list, Luke is not a frontline commander generally, or he shouldn't be, in my opinion. Or in the Luke Leia Sabine list. Like, I don't think you need him to be like sticking his neck out there. That's what Sabine's there for.
Yeah, I know. But like, that's what Luke is really good at.
Like, I don't know. In my experience, he's terrible at that.
Well, okay, not like recklessly. But at some point, you need Luke to be lightsabering things for Luke to get his value back, or at least keeping units from a specific area of the table because he's going to lightsaber them.
Yeah. Dodge tokens are perfectly fine to get him through one shot.
No, I know, but I don't know. I don't like not having essentially Luke ambush in my hand, personally. But maybe that's just a playstyle thing. All right, we gotta wrap the shizzle up.
We'll get one small short nod to Han, Leia, Sabine, which I think we've talked about before on the show. But yeah, that's a thing too. And you actually dropped mess for other things.
Yeah, I think there your command card decisions are easier.
Much. You also have like one of the hottest command hands in the game possible, between like Legacy and Explosions, Reckless Diversion, and Change of Plans, and then No Time for Sorrows and Coordinated Bombardment. You have like
it's
so many good
tools. There are,
and you can still put 5Zs and snipers behind it. It's really fun.
My concern in that list generally is the panic situation on just because all the heroes are Courage 2, but that's like the downside to not running Luke.
You gotta build it out. You had to build it out in a very specific way,
and it's actually like, so another thing that I've experimented with in my Empire forays is Krennic Bosk Death Troopers. Like, it's not at all difficult to throw 6 suppression down on something in the space of 2 activations. Reptilian Rampage plus Entourage equals 6 suppression and 2 activations. So,
have fun with that, Rebels.
So that's why.
Prepare to be gate kept.
Right. All right. Well, we rambled a lot today.
Yeah.
It was fun though.
We sure did.
I enjoyed hearing from you, Jay, on your RPQ win. That was awesome. I'm sure you'll talk about it on your cast too, but
No, well, thanks. I did. Yeah.
I noticed.
Thanks for letting me talk about it. It was a great time, and I know it feels good to play again after we've been doing all the streaming and stuff. So it was just nice.
Heavy is the head that wears the burger crown, Jay.
Yeah, sure is.
Sweet. Well, I guess that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I'm Mike.
I'm Kyle.
I'm David.
Come on, Jay.
I'm Jay.
Here we go.
Shalensky.
Join us next week for another episode of the Notorious Scoundrels.
This has been a Fifth Trooper production.